Meredith Kercher was just 21 years old. She was bright, independent, and excited about life. Born in South London, Meredith grew up in a close-knit family that encouraged curiosity, education, and travel. Friends described her as warm, artistic, and deeply thoughtful. In 2007, Meredith decided to spend a year abroad as part of the Erasmus Student Exchange program. She enrolled at the University for Foreigners of Perugia, Italy, a historic city known for its medieval streets, student culture, and artistic charm. For Meredith, Perugia represented freedom and growth. She rented a small apartment on Via della Pergola, sharing it with other young women, including American student Amanda Knox. Life seemed ordinary. Days were filled with classes, language learning, cafe conversations, and late-night walks through the old city. But beneath the beauty of Perugia, something darker was waiting. On the evening of November 1, 2007, Meredith stayed home while her roommates went out. She spoke briefly with her mother earlier that day. Nothing sounded wrong. Nothing felt dangerous. That night would be her last. The next morning, Meredith was found murdered inside her bedroom. The crime scene shocked Italy and soon captured global attention. A young British student alone, far from home, had been brutally killed. Very quickly, the story stopped being just about Meredith. It became a media storm. Italian police launched an intense investigation, and within days, attention turned toward Meredith's own roommates. Amanda Knox and her Italian boyfriend Raffaele Sollecito were arrested, along with a local man, Rudy Guetti. From the very beginning, the case was messy. Evidence was questioned. Interrogations were controversial. Language barriers, cultural misunderstandings, and sensational journalism fueled confusion. Meredith's identity, her dreams, her life slowly faded behind headlines focused on scandal. For her family, the pain was unbearable. Not only had they lost Meredith, but they now had to watch her name being overshadowed by speculation, leaked details, and courtroom drama. Her parents repeatedly asked one thing from the media: please remember Meredith. This chapter of the story is not about suspects or verdicts. It is about a young woman whose life was stolen, and how the world began arguing over how it happened instead of why justice mattered. Meredith Kercher deserved safety. She deserved protection. She deserved justice.
The discovery of Meredith Kercher's murder sent shockwaves through Perugia and far beyond Italy's borders. What should have been a careful, victim-centered investigation soon turned into one of the most controversial criminal cases in modern history. Italian police arrived at the apartment on Via della Pergola on November 2, 2007. Meredith's bedroom door was locked. When it was finally forced open, investigators were met with a scene that suggested violence, fear, and struggle. The brutality of the crime made it immediately clear that this was not an accident. It was murder. Authorities believed the crime involved more than one person. Within days, attention turned toward Meredith's closest circle, her roommates. Amanda Knox, the American student Meredith lived with, and Knox's Italian boyfriend, Raffaele Sollecito, were brought in for questioning. What followed would later become one of the most criticized interrogation processes in the case. Amanda Knox was questioned for hours, late into the night. Without a lawyer present, she later stated that she was confused, frightened, and under immense psychological pressure. During this time, she made statements that would later be withdrawn and challenged in court. These statements became a key reason for her arrest. At the same time, investigators found DNA belonging to Rudy Guetti, a man known to police for previous break-ins. At the crime scene, Guetti fled Italy but was later arrested in Germany and extradited back. Despite Guetti's presence at the scene, prosecutors insisted the crime was a group act, suggesting a sexual motive and claiming that Knox and Sollecito were involved. The arrest shocked the world. Media outlets exploded with speculation. Headlines painted Amanda Knox as a villain, often using misogynistic language and sensational imagery. She was labeled, judged, and condemned long before the trial began. The focus shifted away from Meredith Kercher, the victim, and onto a dramatic narrative fueled by stereotypes and scandal. In 2009, after a highly publicized trial, Amanda Knox and Raffaele Sollecito were convicted. Knox was sentenced to 26 years in prison, Sollecito to 25. Meanwhile, Rudy Guidi was convicted separately and sentenced to 30 years later reduced. But the case was far from over. Independent forensic experts began reviewing the evidence. Serious concerns emerged. DNA samples may have been contaminated. Key evidence was collected, and pro-interrogation practices were questionable. Crime scene reconstruction was inconsistent. In 2011, an appeals court overturned the convictions of Knox and Salcedo, citing lack of reliable evidence. They were acquitted and released. For a brief moment, it seemed the nightmare was over, but justice systems can be unpredictable.
In 2014, Italy's Supreme Court annulled the acquittal and ordered a retrial. Once again, Meredith's family was pulled back into courtrooms, reliving the worst moments of their lives. Once again, the world debated guilt and innocence, while Meredith remained silent. Finally, in 2015, Italy's highest court delivered its final decision. Amanda Knox and Raffaele Salcedo were definitively acquitted. Rudy Guidi remained the only person convicted for Meredith Kercher's murder. Yet the outcome left many questions unanswered. Did the investigation fail Meredith? Was the truth ever fully uncovered? Did media pressure distort justice? For Meredith's family, there was no sense of victory, only loss. Justice, they said, should never be about spectacle. It should be about truth, dignity, and accountability. This chapter of the story exposes a painful reality. Sometimes, when systems collide with pressure, the victim becomes secondary. And for women like Meredith, justice can become a long, exhausting battle, even after death. When the final ruling in the Meredith Kercher case was announced in 2015, the world heard a legal conclusion, but Meredith's family felt no sense of closure. Courts had spoken. Appeals were exhausted. The case was officially over. Yet justice, in its truest sense, felt incomplete. Meredith Kercher's murder had become more than a criminal investigation. It had evolved into a global debate about justice systems, media responsibility, women's safety, and how easily a victim's voice can be lost in noise. For Meredith's parents, siblings, and loved ones, the pain never ended. They had traveled repeatedly from the United Kingdom to Italy, sitting silently in courtrooms while lawyers argued technical details, DNA traces, timelines, procedures, all while the most important truth remained unchanged. Meredith was gone. She would never graduate. She would never build the future she dreamed of. She would never return home. Her life had been reduced to evidence files. Justice versus Truth. Legally, Italy concluded that Rudy Guidi was responsible for Meredith's murder. He remains the only person convicted. However, even that conviction did not fully satisfy the search for truth. The courts never provided a complete reconstruction of the crime that answered every question. There were contradictions, gaps, moments where logic seemed strained. This is one of the most painful realities for victims' families when justice is delivered in fragments. Justice does not always mean clarity. Justice does not always bring peace. And for women who are victims of violent crime, this reality is disturbingly common. The media's role, a second injustician of the most damaging aspects of Meredith's case, was the way media coverage transformed it into entertainment. Newspapers published intimate details. Television panels debated guilt like a sports match. Online forums spread rumors without restraint. Meredith's identity was overshadowed by sensational narratives centered on suspects rather than the victim. Her family repeatedly asked for restraint. They asked journalists to remember Meredith as a person, not a symbol. But in a world hungry for drama, dignity often comes last. This case stands as a warning. When the media loses its ethical compass, justice becomes distorted. Women who are victims of violence are often stripped of their humanity twice, first by the crime, and then by public spectacle. Women's safety. A globalist when Meredith Kercher was studying abroad, something millions of young women do every year. Her story shattered the illusion that danger only exists in certain places or certain circumstances. She was not reckless. She was not irresponsible. She was simply living her life. And yet, she became a victim. This raises a difficult question society often avoids. How safe are women, really? Meredith's murder exposed systemic vulnerabilities. Lack of proper safety awareness for international students. Insufficient victim-centered investigation skill. Biases that shape narratives about women. Too often, women are asked to modify their behavior rather than systems being asked to protect them. Meredith did everything society expects of young women, and it still wasn't enough. The burden of silence. One of the most haunting aspects of Meredith's story is silence. She cannot tell us what happened. She cannot correct false narratives. She cannot demand accountability. Her silence places a responsibility on us. Justice for women cannot depend solely on courts. It must be carried by society, by institutions, and by people who refuse to forget. Remembering Meredith means demanding better systems, not only for her, but for every woman who comes after. Lessons that must not be ignored. Meredith Kercher's case leaves behind lessons that cannot be buried with legal files. Victims must remain central, not suspects, not headlines. Media ethics matter. Storytelling carries power and responsibility. Justice systems must evolve. Forensic integrity and fair interrogation are essential. Women deserve safety without conditions, not warnings, not blame. Justice delayed is painful. Justice distorted is dangerous. Meredith beyond the crime. Meredith was not defined by how she died. She loved music. She enjoyed photography. She valued friendships deeply. She dreamed of a life filled with purpose. Her family remembers her laughter, not court transcripts. That is the Meredith this story must honor. Why this story still matters. Years have passed since Meredith Kercher was murdered, but her story remains relevant because the issues it exposes still exist. Women are still harmed. Victims are still silenced. Justice is still imperfect. Telling Meredith's story is not about reopening wounds. It is about refusing to normalize injustice. It is about asking hard questions even when answers are uncomfortable. Justice for women, not just a phrase. Justice for women is not a slogan. It is a responsibility. It means listening when women speak. It means protecting before harm occurs. It means ensuring that when violence happens, dignity is not the first casualty. Meredith Kercher's life mattered. Her story matters. And justice, true justice, demands that we remember her not as a case, but as a woman whose future was stolen.